In this session, let's discuss about the function. Functions have a format like this. It would start from DEF, which is like definition of a function when you are defining, and then you have to write the function name, and in brackets you can give the arguments. I mean the inputs you which you want to give to the function. You have to give the arguments. So I'm giving like maybe input 1, input 2, just like if and for the same way even here, before you want to start the lines of code within the scope of function, so we have to put a colon and in the front, and then like we have to start and make sure that like we maintain this space, like it can be like 2 spaces, 4 spaces, anything, but it should be consistent across your entire program. I'll be using a tab for my convenience. Usually like if it is notebook or even in VS Code, it would automatically come. So let me write code line 1. Similarly, you can write multiple lines of code. If you want to go out of this function, you can, next thing is like you have to come back again, align with this one so that it is out of this function but within this line. So this would be the format. So before all that, like let's discuss like why actually the function is needed. We will be able to write program. We saw in our like previous assignment solutions as well. So we will be able to solve using if and loops and like conditions and many other things. We will be able to solve most of the programs. So why actually there is a need for function? For example, now I would like to write a code like this. So let's say now I have written a program to print a star triangle over here. So now the same triangle I would be printing with a different symbol. So where I use sometime I use hash, and other case I would like to use something like at the rate. So and I print it. So I get like different values, right? So but in this code, like this, the functionality of these 4 lines of code is same always, right? So and in case if I want to have a different number of lines, here it was only 4 lines, right? So in case if I want to have more, I would be changing it here. Let's say I want only 3, and run it. We can observe that we have changed at multiple places for making a change. And also in case if there is any issue with this code and you want to fix it, you need to do it at all places, right? So instead of that, in case if we use something like function, if we define this entire lines of code which are getting repeated as a function, let's say. See, here I have defined a function and I'll be able to do the same like just by calling this function like this. So where I give star as an input. Similarly, I would also need something like hash and also one more symbol which is header. So and if I run this, I would be getting the same output as expected earlier. See, the same thing. So but here in case if you want to again add like do the same for like some more characters, like let's say I would like to do the same for x. So I just have to call this function and write a 1 line of code. But in case if it is not a function, so again I have to write like 4 more lines of code again here and paste it.
and write it like this. So only then I would be able to get that output. Instead, in case as here we made this entire lines of code as a function, we don't have to write those lines of code again. So we can just call the function which we have defined and then pass the argument. We can also extend this function by making it like number of lines as one more argument and add it over here. We can modify the number of stars you would like here to print, maybe 5. Even this one you can change like how many you want. Here I need only 2 of at the rates, or here I need 3. We got the outputs like as expected, but here you need to carefully change at different points. Say this is one example where we can see the advantage of using function. You can even reuse the function which was defined in one file like into another. So basically the function definition which we have given is something like this. So it is a kind of a block where we have like the inputs, which is this input symbol, and the other input is like lines of symbol. So here we give our inputs. So this let's treat this block is a function which we have defined earlier, and this takes inputs like input symbol and lines of symbol. So with which like it is going to in case if this function is called, it is going to execute these lines of code which were given as a function definition, and it is going to finally give an output. This makes an output by specifying it in return function. Here in this function definition there is no return function, so it doesn't give any output. I mean there is no value which will be returning out of this function. But in case if you write any return statement over here, let's say I'm returning 1000 here, so then the output here would be 1000. So this is the output which is coming out of this block. So in case now let's say you have called the function here by giving the arguments as star and 5. So in this case this symbol would take the first argument which is star, and lines of symbol would take the second argument which is 5. So these two will be given as input to the function, and it would execute these lines of code. And in case if you have any return function, so which this function doesn't have any return, so in case if it has any return, so that would be output given as output to the value. So now let's discuss what are the different kinds of functions we have based on the inputs and return types. So let's first see function which is having both inputs and return value. So we have a function name. It would be of this format, function name, and you give the inputs. Number of inputs can be any, and then there can be few lines of code. Like finally we can get return, so which can be output 1. So this can also be multiple. It can be separated by a comma, and we can give the output. So it can be more than inputs as well. So this is a format with which like we have both inputs and return value. Let's say you want to add few numbers and multiply with 100. So I just gave the function name as like this. So add 2 numbers and multiply with 100. So and I give input. So I'll give it as like input 1 and input 2, and it should take these 2 numbers, and it would be adding these 2 numbers, which would be input 1 plus input 2. Once this is added, now it would be multiplied by 100. So and this value we can store it as x and then return this x. To call this function, we then give the values, like maybe I want to give 20 and 30 as an input to the function, and you see, and the output I would like to save it in some value a. And now let's see the value of a. So which is like 20 plus 30 is 50. 50 into 100 is 5,000. So we got 5,000 here. The function returns a value here. It does some processing and returns some value here, and that returned value can be stored here. We are storing the value of the output what we get from the function. So that is here. So this is the example of having both input arguments as well as return value. So now let's see a function which contains inputs but no return value. So this would be of a definition of function name, and we can have input 1, input 2, and but there is no return here. So we have seen this example. So this has like inputs, but there is no return value. So as an example, we can use the same function here, give few values like this. So now let's print a value here. So it has printed a star, that is because of this triangle, but the a value is nothing, so it would be none. So it means that like this function has no return, so it has if nothing is there, it would just give a null value. You can see here the value of a is none, so only none would be returned like from the function if there is no return value. In case we want to store the function output, so it would be none. Now let's see, there are no inputs but has a return value. It would be of this format where you don't have inputs here, so input arguments would be empty, but you would be having some values it would return. So this can be any, again, like it need not be 1 to 4, like it can be any. Let's see an example of such kind. So I would like to give a value of 5. So I would like to give this as a return, so it can have some processing or need not, like and I would be returning here the value of 5, let's say, so which would be some 3.14. If you call this function, we just have to do like this, and a equal to, and if you print the value of a, you can see the value is 3.14, which is return value here, so that value is stored here. So this way we can use a function where it doesn't have any inputs but have a return value. And let's also see a case which has no inputs and no return value. Of a definition where you don't have any inputs and don't have any return value, it would be of this format where you don't have any input arguments but also there is no return value, so which can be something like this. So print, so let's say this is a format which I have printed, so this doesn't have any input arguments, doesn't have any return value here, and if I would like to store this value here, so I can again like call this function and store the value into a, and let's see the value of a as well. So as there is no return here, so if you like to store the function, so it would return you a none, so the a value is none here, and there are no input arguments, but like we can use this kind to do some kind of a processing like this. So there is it which doesn't need any input, but here it has I have written a code to print like 100 stars. These are the 4 different combinations which we have seen, like with the input and return values. So there are some of the features within a function, something called default values. Let's discuss about default value with this particular example. Now we would like to call this and then 5, so this works, right? So now for this one, see, for this function, if I forgot to give like one of the argument, it would throw an error saying that it is missing one of the positional argument, which was lines of symbols. So because it expects 2 inputs but we have given only one, because of which we got this error. There are cases like where you don't have that input, you can take some default value. For doing it like that, give a value inside the function definition. So if the value is like 5 given here, and if you run it, so now even if you give 10, let's say input is 3, so it should print 2 values, right? So if you, although you give 5 here, if you specify 3 here, so it would take the value 3, but in case nothing is given, so it would treat like as the value 5 and it would process that way. If you did not specify the value in the argument, so then it would take the default value. In case if you specify it, it would take the value instead of the default value. But this default value should be mentioned only towards the end, but not before. Like So take the example like this. So you have a definition where you want to give symbol as having a default value, but you don't give a default value for line. So this doesn't work. So it would throw an error. It will say that the non-default argument follows that default argument. So initially there should be non-default argument and then the default argument. So in that case, you have to move this at least till after the non-default arguments and then specify the default arguments. So this way it wouldn't give any error. So keyword arguments is a feature within the function, so which would allow us to give the input arguments which were not present in the function definition. It would be of a format where you give like few inputs, and if you specify star star uh, keywords or key w or anything like of your choice, and then within the code lines this would be a kind of a dictionary, so through which you can use that function. So let's see that using an example. So here I would like to give this like this. So function, you have input 1, input 2, and then given it like keywords, and I'm printing here input 1 and input 2 without any processing. I'm just printing, and I would like to know the values of input 1 keywords what I can give. So let's see this. So here I'm just doing a print. So let's say I gave like 10, 20, and here in the keywords I can give new inputs. So it can be input 3, or it doesn't matter like the name, like you can give your own name, equal to 100, when b equal to 2, so something like this. And if you run this code, you can see the value of input 1 is printed, value of input 2 is printed, and if the input keywords would be taking rest of the arguments which after the default as well as non-default arguments, if something new has been specified, and that will be taken as the keywords. So which are these are the new arguments which we have given, so which are like input 3, a and b, and value of input 3 is 100, value of a is 1, and value of b is 2. So these three are it is stored here inside the function as a dictionary containing input 3 as key, input 3 a and b are key values, and then the 100, 1 and 2 are the values for those keys corresponding to those keys. So in case we want to use this, as this is a dictionary now, so you can use this as like keywords of and the key names here. So through this, like this is a key name, and this is a keyword, the value you'd be getting in within the for that corresponding to that key. So we can use it this way. Other than the keywords, so there is also arguments which we can give without any definition. So here it would be of this format, so where you use the code lines, and there is one more thing called arguments here. So let's see how that would work. So I'm taking the same example which we used previously, and to this I'm going to add this new thing called argument or arg, anything would be fine, so it wouldn't matter. And here, so I would let me give it towards the end, and this would be previously these keywords are saved as a format of a dictionary, but this args would save as a tuple. So for that case, so I would be giving as arg and print item. So let me run this and then see what we get. In case if you want to give values like without specifying keywords here, like how we have specified having argument name as well here. So without that, in case we want to specify, give something like 30, 40, 50. So let's say I gave 3 more arguments so before this keywords, so and let's see what it would print. So just to differentiate between the keywords and the items, so let me also print a star. So you can see these args are a tuple, like is saved as a tuple, whereas these keywords are saved in the dictionary. So, but you can access this tuple by you can anyway like access it just like a normal tuple. Here I have used a for loop just for printing each of the element in a separate line, but you can use it like arg of 0, arg of 1 through that way.